Okay, so the next topic that we want to talk about is how to convert units. So what we mean by that is converting from inches to feet, going from miles to kilometers, going from, in chemistry, from moles of a substance to grams of a substance. So all of these different things can be accomplished by using canceling things. So let's do some examples of what do I mean by canceling. So for example, 1 divided by 1 is what? I think you should be able to do this without a calculator. So 1 goes into 1 times. Okay, let's try this. What about if you had 7.3 divided by 7.3? What would that number be? Well, you still don't have to use a calculator. It turns out to be a 1. What about if we use letters? So what would x divided by x be? It's not x. So don't, it's still going to be a 1. So even x divided by x is going to be a 1. Okay, what about if it was a unit? So what about if it was a kilogram divided by a kilogram? What would that be? It would still be a 1. So anything divided by itself, with the exception of 0, who cares about 0? But anything divided by itself is going to be a 1. So that's what we mean by canceling. And the goal of whenever we're converting units is to try to get units to cancel. So our method is going to be to write down 2 sets of parentheses. And then in the first set of parentheses, you're going to write down the number that you're starting with, the number that you're going to be trying to convert to something else. And then in the second set of parentheses, you're going to write down a conversion factor as a fraction so that it cancels out the unit. So what do I mean by conversion factors? So in the back of your book, or if you go on the internet, you're going to find all sorts of different kinds of conversion factors. So like, for example, 1 meter has inside of it 100 centimeters. So that's a conversion factor. So any conversion factor could be written as a fraction. So that means that we could write this as 100 centimeters divided by 1 meter, or we could write down 1 meter divided by 100 centimeters. So either of these two things are going to be a conversion factor. Now, which one you use is going to be determined by what unit that you're going to try to cancel. And so you really have a 50-50 shot, of getting the problem right. But we want to come up with a method that's going to work every time. So let's do some examples of this. So the first one is to convert 3,200 meters into miles. And so we're going to use the conversion factor that 1 mile is equal to 1,609 meters. And so we're going to write down 2 sets of parentheses. In the first parenthesis, we're going to start with what were we given, which was the 3,200 meters. So we put that in the first parenthesis. And then the second parenthesis, we're going to put a fraction, and then that fraction is going to be the conversion factor. Now, what unit are we trying to get rid of? Okay, we're trying to get rid of the meter, so that means I need to put the meter in the second parenthesis on the top or on the bottom. Remember, we're trying to cancel it, so that if you got something on the top, you need to have something on the bottom in order to cancel it. So I'm going to put meter on the bottom, and then on the top I'm going to put mile, because we're trying to go from meters to miles. Okay, now I go to my conversion factor, and I notice that right next to the word meter was the number 1,609. And so I'm going to put that number in there. And then I notice that next to the word mile was 1. So I'm going to put a 1 there. So now I know that the units are going to cancel out. So now with your calculator, all you're going to have to do is take 3,200 and then divide that by 1,609 meters, and then that's going to give you your answer. Now you notice that I did not, I rounded it to 2 significant figures. Now later I'm going to show you how to round, but for right now you can really put any number of numbers that you want there, but really we need to round it down to the correct number of significant figures. So that's for a different lesson. So that's how you would convert from meters into miles. Okay, here's another one where it says convert 20 centimeters into meters. So our conversion factor this time is going to be 1 meter has in it 100 centimeters. So if you remember, the meter stick was about this big, and then the numbers on it were called the centimeters, and they went from 0 to 100. So there's 100 centimeters inside of 1 meter. So in our first set of parentheses, we're going to write down what did we start with. So 20 centimeters. Okay, and then in the second set of parentheses, that's going to be our conversion factor. We want to get rid of the word centimeter, so I'm going to put the centimeter on the bottom, and I'm going to put the meter on the top, and then I go to my conversion factor, and 100 was next to the word centimeter, and 1 was next to the word meter. And so now I get out my calculator, and I do the calculation, and I get 0.20 meters. And so that again would be good to 2 significant figures. All right, now this third one, don't worry about it if you're in physics, or if you're in geology, or if you're in astronomy, or if you're in meteorology. But if you're in chemistry, this would be one of the type of problems that you would do. So in your chemistry course, let's say that you want to use your periodic table to determine the mass of 10 moles of gold. And the abbreviation on the periodic table for gold is AU. So you go to your periodic table and you look up gold, AU, and you find that there's 2 numbers. So there's a number that doesn't have the decimal point, and that's going to be the atomic number, which is the number of protons in that particular element. And then you have the number that does have the decimal point, which is the atomic mass, which is going to be the number of grams of gold in 1 mole of gold. So that's what that number means. And so we're going to write down 2 sets of parentheses. In the first parenthesis, we're going to write down what we were given, 10 moles of gold. And then in the second parenthesis, we're going to write down the atomic mass of gold. Now notice that we're trying to get rid of the word mole, and so that means that mole needs to be in the bottom part of the fraction. So that means the number that has the decimal point needs to be on the top part of the fraction. And then it's just a matter of getting out your calculator and multiplying those 2 numbers together. And you notice that I rounded it down to 2 significant figures again. So that's the technique of converting units. Now there is another way of converting units without using these parenthesis things, and that is by using a proportion. So for example, let's go back to this one here that convert 20 centimeters into meters. So we could make up a proportion and say that 1 meter is to 100 centimeters, and then that's going to be equal to, okay, how many meters? So we're trying to convert it into meters. So let's just put an X there, is to 20 centimeters. And so there's a proportion, and you could solve that for the letter X, and you would get the exact same answer that you would get with the parentheses. So you might be saying, well, I already know how to do it this way, so why should I have to do it using parentheses? Well, the nice thing about the parenthesis thing is you can chain them together. So that, let's say that first you're going to want to go from 20 centimeters to meters, and then let's say you want to go from meters to miles. So then you could put another set of parentheses next to the other two, and then that would be the conversion factor that would then take you from meters to miles. So they do a lot of this in chemistry, where maybe they go from moles to grams, or actually let's say they go from grams to moles, and then let's say that they have a different chemical over here, and they need to convert it from moles of this chemical, and when it turns into this chemical over here, it's a different molage. So then they go from moles of this chemical to moles of this chemical, and then once they got moles of this chemical, they can go to grams of that chemical, so that you can chain these parentheses together, and it works pretty well. You'll also notice that in chemistry, instead of parentheses, they tend to use lines. So they have what you start with, 20 centimeters, and then they put a line, and then 1 meter, and then 100 centimeters. So it's the same thing, but for some reason they like to use lines instead of parentheses. Okay, so that is how to convert units. And so our next topic is going to be on scientific notation, and I'll see you in just a moment.